moved.
I'll second.
Motion by Schumacher, a second by Caravello. Anybody have any questions about the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? None opposed, that motion carries. City Council Representative Report. Alderperson Caravello, is there anything to report out?
Is a few things to report from the October 11th council meeting. Ordinances 18, 24, and 25 of 2022 were approved, and at the October 25th meeting, resolution 202 of 2022 were approved.
All right, any questions on that? Hearing none. Next item would be staff report. Director Shield.
In your packet, you'll find the standard kind of summary of projects that are pending or in progress. I know that we've talked about landscaping revisions at Walmart or corrections that are being done out there. Just about done. Got 6 more trees to have done there. I thought it was also noteworthy to highlight Eldon Homes has taken out 20 building permits for new homes, and Lennar over in the Kettle Park West area has taken out 12. Just to give you a synopsis of a few of the items. If there's any questions, I'd welcome them.
Any questions on the staff report?
My 18-year-old son wanted to know why Popeyes is so slow on their building permit. He's anxiously awaiting this.
And I got a couple of people.
I can't say. I don't know what they're waiting for, because they have submitted some materials for their erosion control stuff, and as you know, they've gone through the Plan Commission approval already, but I don't have a status report on it.
He claims to want to be customer number 1, so.
Oh,
Okay.
I thought maybe you were going to encourage him to be employed there.
We worked at Pick and Save, so maybe he could do both.
All right. Any other questions on the staff report? Hearing none. Next item is a preliminary plat for Magnolia Springs. And before we go into the public hearing, Director Shield will give us an overview of the plat that's been submitted.
Sure. So the preliminary plat for Magnolia Springs, and I'll pull it up on the screen, at least the layout to give folks that aren't familiar with it. It's a subdivision that's proposed on the southern edge of the city, the extension of South Page Street all the way to Acker. And then off of Taylor Lane would be a street that would come off of Acker. All single family and duplex units within the facility. Commissioners are familiar with at least some of the concept plans that were related to this, and actually I'll pull up a color illustration at this point. And for the folks that might not be as familiar with the project, this is in our packet, but the items in this salmon color are actually duplex units, and all of the other ones are single-family residential units. You might recall one of the major features is this stormwater boulevard, if you will, an area down the center of Page Street that allows conveyance of water that comes from off-site to traverse through the site. It would then be piped through the system after it hit the, as shown here, Future Road B. One of the things that I think is unique in this is particularly the center stormwater management area essentially creates a boulevard. So on either side of that segment of roadway, you'll just have one-way traffic. And so people that do traverse through here would have to go north at this point, or if they're coming from the west, they would have to go south and either go around it or travel out to Acker. So I think those are features that were noteworthy. The parkland configuration, or the areas for the parkland, as you might recall, Parks and Recreation Committee had input in this area, understands the need to preserve the pond in that area, but there's also some additional stormwater management areas that are not calculated as part of dedicated parkland, but contained within the open space area of that location. There's a proposed trail system which we'd consider a shared use path, essentially a paved 10-foot wide path that's shown going throughout the project, and east to west from Taylor and/or 4th Street to the western edge along the southern edge of the Parker Cole development, where the 6 duplex lots are nearing completion for construction now at this point. So stormwater management, Outlot 2 is a large stormwater management facility in addition to the area contained in the boulevard of this area. I think it might be helpful for me to walk through some of the aspects of the resolution that the commissioners will be considering tonight. In preparation for that, the things that I want to highlight is the preliminary plat is essentially the first step to approving a plat or an area that subdivides the land. Once the preliminary plat's been approved by City Council, the next step would be a final plat. But what happens at this stage, we can establish a number of conditions that would need to be satisfied before we'd feel comfortable in approving a final plat. So it's really a process in which we try to articulate concerns or issues or corrections or clarifications on the preliminary document before we act on a final document going forward. So I'll just highlight, and some of this is for the benefit of the audience as well. Some of this is very standard language for commissioners and council members that they're aware of. It would require, prior to final plat, we'd have to have a development agreement that outlines the improvement requirements that are necessary. This particular area is going to require some specific off-site improvements. There's some sanitary sewer upgrading that needs to be done on Page Street between Isham and Milwaukee Street. Now, it's not that full stretch, but there's a segment in that corridor that needs to be upsized in order to accommodate this development, as well as making improvements to South Page Street. That's just this area, but from Isham to the North Platte line would be considered off-site, but it connects to the actual plat. And then there's a small level of improvement along South 4th Street. We're not envisioning this segment to become urbanized with curb and gutter and sidewalk. You'll recognize it's quite rural in nature in that area now, and the other side of the roadway is essentially wetlands and unbuildable. But we do anticipate an off-roadway shared use path that would extend that frontage from the new street north to Isham. And why is that kind of important? Because as part of a 2025 project, the city's got some federal dollars to assist with improving South 4th Street from Isham Street all the way to Milwaukee Street. And part of that plan anticipates a shared use path on the west side of Page Street in that segment at that time. Likewise, Acker Road, east to west, is a rural cross-section street. As planned right now, this area would not currently be subject to improvement with curb and gutter and sidewalk, but it would have appropriate tapers and pavement connections to Acker to accommodate that new connection to Acker. The zoning, as outlined in this illustration and by color I spoke of earlier, the parkland would be zoned institutional, so would the stormwater management facilities. Some other specific, boilerplate language, if you will. The commissioners and council members will recall we went through a capital area regional planning commission to amend the urban service area for this district. That has been approved. There's a number of conditions and/or recommendations that came out of that approval. The recommendations are included in this resolution for the developer to work with us on. One is to request a formal endangered resources review by the DNR. Not that there's any expectation of that, but to have that completed as part of the process. One of the other items is to propose methods to encourage the use of the native flora favored by the rusty patched bumblebee in landscaping. So that's an endangered, not an endangered, but a species that we're trying to accommodate or possibly recognize in home sites and or parkland areas. You'll also, commissioners, in your packet was a formal, not a formal, but a Strand memorandum dated November 8th. Pretty lengthy document, but it's one that staff worked with the consulting engineer, our consulting engineer, to identify recommendations both for the plat level improvements and also in preparation of construction plans going forward. So we can go through those very specifically if the commissioners would like, but that outlines the level of improvements that we're anticipating to accompany the final plat. I should note the parkland area that's proposed to be dedicated meets the minimum area requirement for the number of units that are proposed in this, so there would not be a fee in lieu of dedication requirement. There would be park facility fees, but not parkland dedication fees in lieu of. A number of just standard language items in the resolution. You're very accustomed to seeing those types of things in your previous actions. If the commissioners would like, I can step through a few of these. I'll call it the Strand Memorandum, because it outlines some of the recommendations that we anticipate seeing as part of the final plat. One of the recommendations from staff at this point is Outlot 4, which is on the will be the southeast corner of the plat, if you will, right adjacent to this roadway. There really, in our opinion, isn't a public purpose for this area. And instead of the city maintaining it, we think it should either be maintained privately and or attached to one of the adjacent parcels for private ownership and management. I talked about the connections of Future Road B and Page Street. Both of those would be rural connections with appropriate tapers of asphalt to the rural cross sections. We did look at this segment of South Page Street and feel that it's appropriate to have, in this corridor especially, an 8-foot wide terrace. So what we've recommended is a slightly wider dedication of right-of-way on both sides, 2.5 feet on either side of this. Some referred to it as a rocket, but this area of stormwater management on either side. And I think the development team is looking at how they might be able to accomplish that. We also highlighted some of the irregular shaped lots, not that they're unbuildable, but we wanted to make sure the development team understood what kind of the building envelopes like lot 15, 16, and possibly a couple of others like lot 30 may present unique challenges for them to build. They are buildable. They have building envelopes that allow for construction, but we did highlight those for consideration by the development team. Obvious language related to easement dedication requirements. What's not shown on this particular illustration in color is there is a need for a water main to connect between Future Road B and Future Road C, somewhere between, I believe it was lots 65 and 64. And also 73 and 74. So there would be an easement that would be necessary or dedication of land for that public infrastructure. Staff also thought it would be an appropriate place to install sidewalk to make that connection closer to the parkland. So at that point, that is listed as one of the recommendations as well. Some of these parcels won't be able to be gravity served to a basement. Now, the developer has indicated not all these parcels were ever envisioned to have basements, but that being said, we think that might be appropriate to distinguish on the plat so that potential buyers of any lot could recognize that if they install the basement on that particular parcel, they wouldn't be able to be served by gravity. They would have to have a grinder pump or a pressurized sewer to accomplish that type of construction. We also wanted to highlight when we start looking at the grading plan, and this might be a bit more technical, but the stormwater management plan here is, there's a pretty significant off-site volume of stormwater that comes through this site and will going forward. The grading plan, and to accomplish the lot layouts here, really creates an area where this Future Road D, if you will, is higher than Acker Road, which seems logical. But one of the challenges with doing that is you create somewhat of a dam for stormwater for the safe overflow. Yes, they're accommodating 100 and 200 year storm events through the piping, but in the event those areas fail, then you have the potential to inundate a couple of parcels on either side right along Acker. And we're wanting them to be aware of that, model that for us, and if necessary, noted on the plat going forward. So that would be something we'd be looking at before we approve the final plat. 10-foot short use path. On South Page Street, you'll recognize the stormwater management area has a configuration that's consistent with previous concepts. They had proposed having somewhat of a irregular or offset pavement width in here to maybe adjust this line slightly, maybe 5 feet of the stormwater basin. We think it's really appropriate to have a uniform street width of Page Street between Future Road B and Isham Street. This will be somewhat of a unique driving environment, as you can recognize coming into this area where we have a bulb or a boulevard that you'll enter. But we also think that there's a possibility of a fair amount of traffic utilizing this area. So staff and our consulting engineers feel it's appropriate to have a uniform street width here. Again, not necessarily a preliminary plat item, but we're highlighting some of the construction items that we think would be refined as we move forward with the final plat. Also wanted to highlight for the commissioners, Future Road B, there's a 66-foot wide right-of-way dedicated for Future Road B from 4th Street to Page Street. That's seen as a higher kind of traffic corridor, if you will. If you might remember, there's some development potential to the west, but less so than this area. So that's tapered down to a 60-foot wide right-of-way on Future Road B going to the east or to the west of Page Street. Really what that accomplishes is you've got a slightly narrower pavement width, which we've been all being aware of trying to minimize pavement surfaces, so slightly less pavement width, and instead of an 8-foot wide terrace, I think you end up with a 7-foot wide terrace in all the other streets other than Page Street and Future Road B off to the east here. I think that highlights at least a good overview for the public and for the commissioners. Certainly we can go through more details. Obviously I wanted to share some of that background for the audience and people that might want to speak at the public hearing that didn't have that background. So with that, Mayor, it's up to you how you'd like to proceed.
Thank you for the overview. As you can tell, there's a lot of thought that's put in there by Rodney, other departments in the city of Stoughton, as well as our engineers. We would just soon, bring these items up front at this stage. That way, the developer will have time to incorporate those into the final plat, is the hopes. Are there any initial questions before we go into the public hearing? Commissioner Farrell?
Hey, Mayor, Outlot 2, I seem to recall seeing this before, and I thought one of the commissioners mentioned something about I can't remember who it was, about the shape.
Yeah.
And this is a little tweak to that, what we saw originally, right?
Yep,
It
a
was
very
just-
little tweak.
It was a little rectangle, now it's got
Yeah.
a little teardrop at the top.
Yeah,
Roads, right?
they're certainly constrained, but yes, that's the proposal as they've laid it out, this grading plan. I can zoom in slightly here, but on the
Remember who it
screen.
was that mentioned that? I can't.
Yeah,
remember.
it was mentioned, certainly.
Alderman Mayeski did.
Oh,
Yep.
oh, okay. That's because I
Correct.
wonder if that satisfies the desire to have an unnatural shape. It is a tweak, but it's a pretty small one.
It-
But I
it
understand
is
it's
challenging.
difficult. It's challenging to
It
do
is
anything
challenging.
other than what
Um,
they have, I know.
And I think Alderman Mayeski is zoomed in. I don't know if he has any comment on that. Not hearing Tom.
Other questions?
Yeah, I'm not hearing you, Tom. We'll come back to you. Alderperson Schumacher, did you have a?
Yep, I was just gonna ask Rodney, was one off of the last point that you were making, that kind of squeeze down of the Future Road B,
Yeah.
the 66 to 60 foot. Would that 60 foot have available on-street parking then for both sides at a 60 foot width?
Does.
Okay, all right.
It does. It's narrower. Obviously, the
Yep.
pavement width's a couple of feet narrower, but it does accommodate it. It does also promote slower speeds because you have a tighter network there.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering, if
Just for
we've,
comparison, Nordic Ridge, you might recall Nordic Ridge on some of the latter phases, we actually have pavement widths that are approximately the same in the off of Whole Street area, or off of Whole Avenue. So we've certainly been trying to put some of our streets on a diet, if you will. Still accommodating sidewalks on both sides as part of the pedestrian plan, but narrowing the pavement widths.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I understand the Zoomers are having a difficult time hearing us. So if we can make sure we speak in our microphones. And then if you're zooming in, if you're not speaking, if you can make sure that you're muted. I guess there's some background noise. We appreciate that. Hopefully you can hear us better now.
We can't hear them, though, that's for sure.
No.
Chat, you could type in questions.
Are there any other questions at this point? We're going to try to figure out, we can't hear the Zoomers.
No answer. He thinks it should be working.
All right.
They can hear us, but we
All right.
Is there anything else we can do here?
Muted on both. I don't know which one you've got.
This doesn't have a speaker.
Okay. So it sounds like the Zoomers can hear each other, but we can't hear them.
See if I turn up my volume. It gives feedback.
Okay. Did anybody on Zoom have any questions to this point? Can you hear Tom?
Cannot.
Okay, go ahead. We'll repeat them after we hear you.
We can on on my computer, but not on the screen.
So my first question is, yeah, I'm very disappointed. First of all, I'm very disappointed in consider the reconfiguration of the detention pond. It doesn't meet the spirit of what we were trying to do when we changed the ordinance whatsoever. It's a square with a little whip on it. That's number one. Two, I have a question regarding parkland. Is the area of water, was that calculated in as part of the parkland dedication?
The answer is no.
Okay.
I'm gonna write your questions down, and then I'll repeat them to the audience so we don't get this feedback.
Okay. And then I'm looking at the topographical of the parkland, and it seems like the majority of that parkland is a pretty steep grade. So I don't know how useful that parkland actually is. And then also, outlot number 4, why did they just dedicate it as part of the parkland so that we could have a decent entrance coming into that subdivision? And, they are allowed to go above, you don't have to just always do the middle.
Is that your questions for now, Tom? I'll repeat them individually.
Yes, thank you.
Alder Maskey's first comment was Outlot 2 doesn't really meet the spirit of the ordinance for trying to create an irregular, or I'll call it peanut shape, but he didn't use that term, but some type of curvilinear. So he's disappointed about that. Second observation is the water area found on Outlot 3 used as part of the parkland area? It is not. So the water area and the stormwater management and the pond area are not part of the actual calculation for the land available in those locations. Third comment was related to the grade within the parkland of Outlot 3. A lot of topography there, a lot of contour there. I know that the Parks and Rec Committee did work with the development team on this and did identify an area that they would like to see a small playground area, and that's identified in the northern part of this area adjacent to the trail. I think they did also want to have some type of trail network that came back across the site from north to south in that area. So I think those provisions were at least discussed and understood by the Parks and Rec group. I don't know if the mayor has information on that as well.
I know Park and Rec, what they really wanted to make sure, and Phil, you can help me out here, is that the area that's shaded there for the playground, I think they specified the 9,000 square feet that they wanted to accommodate the playground, and then focus the rest of the park on the trail system, and then utilizing that wetland as a feature.
The last comment made by Alder Mayeski was Outlot 4. Wondering if that could be dedicated or should be dedicated as land to the public as part of over and above the parkland. And I should clarify, it is proposed to be dedicated to the city at this point. The current concern was raised internally about how that site would be maintained and how it would be used. Yes, it's an open space area, but the concern raised was, what does that look like? It's very steep, actually. There's a fairly steep contour along Outlot 4 as proposed. Just one second, I'll get to that point. So you can see on Outlot 4, there's a fairly steep area. There's a small flatter portion right adjacent to the road right away, but the back portion has some fairly significant contours, so it's really open space. So currently, as it's recommended in the resolution, that area would be added to or privately owned and maintained.
Rodney, are those 1 foot contour lines or?
Yeah, the question was, are they 1 foot or 2 foot? I believe they're 2 foot, with the larger ones being every 10 feet.
Okay.
Other questions from the commissioners before we open it up to the public?
Go ahead.
I pretty strongly agree with Tom about that Outlot 2. The shape of that thing is really, I would think a little imagination could preserve the use and what needs to be done with that lot, but a little imagination could go to maybe, nuancing it a little bit with a different shape so it's not really just mostly a rectangle.
For those that couldn't hear maybe online, I know that in WSTO they're asking us to speak in our mics. Outlot 2, the configuration was reinforced, the concern about not really being a unique type of character there. We can certainly send that message back. I think we'd have to modify the resolution to do so. The resolution essentially recognizes it as such that it is. I think if there's much revision to it, it likely would, you'd probably have to take away 1 or more lots in order to accomplish that in that area.
Any other questions from commissioners at this point? Okay, so we do have the need for the public hearing, so what we do is we close our regular order of business, and then we reopen for the public hearing, And last I checked, I didn't have anybody that signed up online to speak. Is anybody here wish to speak at the public hearing on this topic? Hearing none, we would close the public hearing and then reopen for our business. And our business is we're looking for a recommendation to the city council. As Rodney outlined, we do have a resolution in the packet with multiple provisions on there. And I guess, we could entertain a motion for that resolution. And if there's other things that you want to discuss during the deliberation, we could certainly do that. Anybody willing to entertain making that motion to get the conversation started here?
I'll make the motion to recommend it to council.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
A second by Bradford. Are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, if we can make an amendment regarding the Outlot 2 configuration, just something that's a little more, or a little less than the way it is now.
Well, I'll draw your attention to the part of the resolution that we should modify then,
Okay.
because there's an item in here where, I'm glad as we do on all of our preliminary plats, we've got language related to that discussion right here on item D under the recitals, where the Plan Commission and Council find that the configurations of the stormwater management ponds within the plat are acceptable under that code section. So if you're not comfortable that meets that standard, it's very important to modify this in some way and provide as much guidance as you can for them to consider coming before they come back with the final plat.
So if we could add something that, that it is not deemed acceptable at this point with that current example, if something can be, I don't know if maybe Alder Majewski might be able to come up with some, I'm just thinking of something that is less rectangular or less sharp-edged or square.
All right, we'll try it again here. Alder Majewski, if you hear us, do you have any language you'd like to propose?
Just that it should be organic in nature, with straight lineal footage not exceeding 20 feet.
Can you clarify that, Alder Majewski? I'm not understanding that. No linear sections greater than 20 feet, is that what I heard?
Yeah, without there being some sort of curve or so that it's more organic in nature. I mean, when you look at what is proposed right now, it screams man-made. It screams of an engineer plopping something down. It's functional, it works, but it's not aesthetically pleasing to anybody, except maybe an engineer. And the whole purpose of us changing the ordinance last year was to get away from that. And apparently, we're going to have to revisit that because what I'm seeing coming forward, the last two projects we've had, don't even come close. They give lip service to it, so I will bring it back for modification again, and with much stronger language. And also, I would hope that the planning department, in the preliminaries, when they have their preliminary discussions before we get to this point, is a little more strenuous in how they steer engineering firms and developers in how these are presented.
Yeah, in defense of myself and my department,
I'm not saying that you haven't, but I'm saying that hopefully we will get there.
yeah, I appreciate the comments. I think the developers, engineer and their team are on board, are on the line tonight. They certainly know that this item was brought up both by the commissioners and staff in the past, and trying to figure out how to make that work with their goal of trying to achieve an affordable rate is probably the struggle they're grappling with right now.
That's the reason we have ordinances, so they can try to figure that out before they get to this point.
Rodney, is it a volume restriction as far as what, they need to have X number of cubic feet of
Yeah,
capacity?
it's all based on the stormwater management plan that has to be put together for rates and volumes, having to be accommodated on the site and in various locations within the site even, so.
Yeah, I think what you see is an attempt to do so, especially, when you get into the other pond, in the park area where it really doesn't butt up against the homes. And even Outlot 2, tries to at least have some curvature to it. Although, I can certainly see your point where some of it is pretty straight. But there might be some things that they can do with that and with the landscape around it in order to, make it look more natural. I just don't know engineering-wise, what they can do, with the size of it, because obviously it needs to function as well. So, was there a second on the motion? I'm sorry, I had to step out, but
I don't think there was a motion yet.
On the amendment?
we had a motion by Caravello,
Yeah.
and I didn't catch the exact wording.
An amendment by me.
Right, yep.
On the amendment.
Yeah, so we have to nail down the wording and then see if there's a second. Otherwise, this conversation, will get lost.
So, I think where I was going, with the input of Alder Majewski, just basically his comments or recommendations of the, 20-foot distance of linear space and, just something to make it look more organic. I'm not sure how you want to put that into exact words.
And I think that's the struggle we had when we tried to work on the ordinance is how do you articulate that? And it's going to vary on every development, and it could even vary in the eye of the beholder. Obviously, the developer sees it as one thing, the engineer sees it as something else, and we all individually might see it as multiple things. So we are trying to find a balance here. Our Commissioner Farrow.
Mayor, I don't think we can specify any sort of 20-foot code or wording in there. Because I'm looking at the code, and all the code says is curvilinear rather than rectangular shall be used whenever possible. And so, I think we're making up code, are we not, if we try to say there's something beyond that we want to see? I mean,
Yeah, and like you said, I think there is an attempt here to incorporate that curvilinear into this outlot. Certainly, we can talk to them and see what they can do, like I said, around the edges. A lot of times, it looks different when it's drawn out like this than it is when it's landscaped and some of the edges could be, softened or,
It could be said curvilinear in appearance that are similar to those found in nature.
For the sake of your motion, maybe I can offer a suggestion. Item D of the resolution indicates that this finds that they are acceptable, or this is acceptable to the ordinance by your finding. If that is not the case, you could say that it does not meet the standards of that. Then you can frame direction after that. I mean, obviously, if it doesn't meet the standard, the development team and designers are gonna be hoping to get some guidance to assist with what we're trying to achieve.
Well, yeah, I think if we put it in there that we found it unacceptable, and then using some wording, I'm not sure.
So make that motion
Um,
first?
Yeah, I think it's a question if it's consistent with the ordinance, or at least the intent of the ordinance. I mean, I think there was a genuine,
I think so.
you don't think it is, okay. I
No.
think there was an effort to make it, but if you don't believe that it is, then I think that's what the amendment needs to be.
Yeah, so I think the amendment, if we states that we find it unacceptable as far as the ordinance is concerned.
So changing that to unacceptable is the motion,
Yes.
and you're looking for your second, right, at this point?
Yeah.
And Alderperson Mieski, I assume you want to second that?
I will second that.
Okay. So let's make sure we have the wording down.
Essentially, it's just modifying item D here to say that the configuration is unacceptable under section, as part of this motion. That's really the change in this motion.
Yep.
So what I'm trying to understand is what we're trying to do is approve the plat with conditions. We're saying this condition is not acceptable. So what does that mean in practicality? Does that mean the plat is not approved, or it's approved with that exception?
I was thinking that if you pass this motion, then you move into a criteria, what you're seeking to change. If this motion fails, then you proceed with action on it without that modification.
Okay. Any questions on the amendment that's on the floor? All right, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? I would be opposed. And looks like Bradford is opposed.
5-2.
Yep, the ayes have it. So we have to, we have a motion as amended, so I think the next step would be to try to figure out what is it that we'd like to do to make this acceptable.
I will give you some language tomorrow.
I think in the interim, I think you could provide an additional bullet point of a condition. That the modifications are required to outlot 2 to the configuration to be consistent with that ordinance section before the final plat can be approved.
Are you okay with that, Alder Mieski?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
I didn't make that motion, I'm not a motioner.
So we need a motion.
I will make a motion using that language from Director Shield,
All right.
since he's writing it down.
Anybody want to second that?
Second now.
Second by Schumacher. So this would be a second amendment, and the amendment would be to, go ahead, Rodney.
Prior to approval of final plat, the city shall find the configuration of outlot 2 to be modified to a condition consistent with ordinance section. In other words, you have to approve it. You're saying that the outlot 2 configuration is not meeting your acceptance right now, and it has to be modified in a manner that would be acceptable to you prior to approval.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
Anybody on Zoom have any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Aye. And any opposed? That motion is unanimous. So that takes us back to the original motion with the 2 amendments. Does anybody have any questions on what the 2 amendments we just approved, or the main motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the original motion as amended twice, say aye.
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 And any opposed? That carries. All right, thank you. Next item is conditional use for indoor commercial entertainment use, arcade and video gaming, including alcohol consumption at 384 East Main Street. This one here has a need for a public hearing as well. Anything you want to go through, Director Shield, before we go into public hearing?
This is a pretty standard conditional use permit application for a change of use in the downtown district, a former office facility. Arcade video gaming is a conditional use within the district under indoor commercial entertainment. That's why it's before you as part of a CUP process.
All right, any initial questions before we go into public hearing? Anything from the Zoomers? We can hear you loud and clear now.
Can hear you.
Okay, hearing none, we'll close the regular meeting, reopen for the public hearing. Nobody was signed up. Anybody in the audience want to speak on this topic? Going once, twice, 3 times, hearing none. Close the public hearing, reopen for our regular business. We're also looking for a recommendation to City Council on this one. And I believe there's a resolution for this one as well.
Yep. Sorry.
I would entertain a motion to approve this.
We're gonna do
I will move to approve.
Motion by Caravello, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderperson Majewski. Any questions or comments on this one? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 And any opposed? None opposed, that motion carries. Next item, same property, electronic message board signage at 384 East Main Street. You want to give us an overview on this one?
Yeah. So you're in the downtown design overlay district, and part of your finding is part of this renovation. The signage is considered a renovation under that overlay district standard. What you need to find, or what the language related to this in the ordinance says, compatible and harmonious with existing buildings. I should highlight there was at least a discussion about the local landmark district being created by the Landmarks Commission. At least in casual conversation, they're concerned that this electronic message board sign doesn't meet that kind of characteristic. So I'll just present that. It wasn't official action. Again, they're looking at creating the local district, and we provided this as an example for them to contemplate if they ultimately become the body to review this type of application in the future. Right now, the resolution is written to approve it. If there is a desire to not approve it, that would have to be modified to do so.
I'll open it up for any questions or comments, or unless somebody wants to entertain a motion. Commissioner Farrell?
Director Shield, who is that group again?
The Landmarks Commission, we have a local Landmarks
Okay.
Commission, and the Landmarks Commission oversees the historic districts within the city, and they're in the process of becoming the authority to regulate differently within the locally designated downtown Main Street district. They currently don't. They have input and have some authority for certain buildings, but they don't regulate the entire district at this point.
Okay.
So currently in
This and weren't happy with it.
Yeah, again, it wasn't because of this being a specific one. There's a number of things that we're looking at as a commission right now that are in the downtown district. If they became the authority regulating these ideas and these applications similar to this, are ones they would have to contemplate how to deal with. That was the spirit in which they talked about this one.
Do we know, is it a sign or is it cause I hear message board, I think it's gonna have different messages flashing as opposed to a sign that has a static, font and that's it.
Well, the
Change.
applicants here, I can just highlight electric message boards. We have regulations that we can't change more than once per 10 seconds. It has to remain static for at least 10 seconds. Doesn't mean it can't change, but that's really the standard on electric message boards in the city.
I just,
Go ahead.
I don't always agree with the Landmarks Commission, but in this case, I do think that that's kind of fine. right on the main street downtown, just doesn't fit what we're trying to support as a community. And I also, as a business person, don't really see the value in the message board that faces that way at that angle for the business owner. So I just, I think they can have a very effective sign without it being an electronic sign in that downtown area. I mean, it is a historic district. That's where they chose to be. So I think there are some constraints on what should be going on down there.
Couple of ways I think you could handle this. You could make a motion on the resolution and either vote it up or down. If you're in favor of it, you'd approve, you'd vote in affirmative. If you are opposed to it, then you'd vote down the resolution. If you want to have any discussion with the applicant, they're here, so you can certainly have that conversation more directly if you want questions answered by them.
Yeah, I would just add, typically on a message board, especially in the downtown, we see them on the inside of the window, typically. This one, I think, is proposed to be on the outside of the building.
Yeah, it's outside the parameter.
So, and as far as I know, this might be the first request of this type that I'm aware of anyway. Have you had any other requests?
I can't recall one similar to this in the downtown area.
Personally, I don't think that really fits the downtown area. Looks like someone just threw a box up on top of the canopy, and it just maybe there's nothing we can do about it. I don't know, but it certainly doesn't look like it fits downtown at all.
Well,
I think
certainly it's up to you whether you want to approve it or not. I think that's why we're here. Does anybody interested in making a motion one way or another, or there is a resolution in there? How would you prefer we?
Again, if you vote for the motion, somebody could make a motion to approve the resolution, and then during voting, if you support it, you'd vote affirmative. If you don't support it, you'd vote against. I think that's
Yeah, I think that's how we try to do it. So if you want to at least make the motion and get a second so we can take an action.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Schumacher. And then we'd open it up for any questions or comments. Did you have any, Phil, or?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it. I think it actually detracts from the building and neighboring buildings in downtown. I just don't see that particular type of sign. Seems a little odd for that space. And Doran, I thought, had a good point that that type of sign in that space facing that direction, seems like the utility of it would be a little, unless somebody's walking out of the Opera House, they'd get a good view of it. But, yeah, not a huge fan.
Is there still a tree directly in front of that building?
Yeah, there's a picture
Okay.
of it, actually.
All right, I was wondering,
Oh, yes, there is a tree
it
directly in
just
front
seemed to
of it.
obscure it a little bit.
I don't see the value of it for the business owner.
It would obscure it a little bit, but
Yeah.
my biggest thing is it's literally right across the street from the Opera House, which
Yeah.
is iconic Stoughton, and I think it's a bad vibe.
I'm assuming the reason not to put it inside of the window is because it's a heavily mullionated window.
I would just think.
Any other questions or comments? Anyone out in Zoom land have anything for us? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of the motion, say aye. And all opposed, say nay.
Nay.
No.
Nay.
All right, that motion does fail. Next item is certified survey map to split the property at 1540 Williams Drive. Director Shield?
So there's a number of items on your agenda tonight related to this particular project, but the Gingerbread House is looking at building a new facility along Williams Drive on lands just to the south of Business Park Circle. On your screen at this point is the address that's shown as 1540 on the map. This initial action item is to split the parcel as outlined in the certified survey proposal. As outlined here, what you'll also maybe not see directly in this, but there is an easement area that's being created in the back portion of both of these lots. They're going to actually share stormwater management facilities between the two, but the CSM is proposed to create the two parcels, Lot 1 and Lot 2, along along Williams Drive.
All right, any initial questions from commissioners before we go into public hearing?
No public hearing on this one.
Oh, I'm sorry, what am I looking at here? Oh, I'm one ahead of us.
Yep, you're one
Okay,
ahead.
I'm already looking on the next page. Any questions or comments on the CSM?
This lot is that whole planted corn lot between the edge of the Mo's property and Nelson, correct?
Yep, the one closest to Nelson Global.
Yep,
Yep.
okay.
Do you know, Rodney, are they planning on keeping both properties?
I don't know for sure at this point. I think the Gingerbread operation is planning to utilize only one parcel.
Okay,
And they do own both.
it's one big parcel
Oh,
now.
okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. I was just kind of curious. Any questions or comments from commissioners? So we'd be looking for a recommendation on this one. I would entertain a motion on the CSM.
I'll make the motion to recommend to council.
A motion by Schumacher, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by, was it Caravello?
Hmm?
All right. Any comments? Questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. And any opposed? None opposed, that motion carries. All right. Item 9 is a conditional use for the daycare use for the Gingerbread preschool and childcare at the same address, which is 1540 Williams Drive. This is the one that has the public hearing. Anything you want to cover before we go into it?
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward, actually. The use is conditional within the district. It's zoned institutional. Institutional is actually, or the daycare use is actually consistent with the future land use in the comprehensive plan as well. So it seems like an appropriate use to be utilizing this site. I think you might recall Martin Luther originally acquired this site with that purpose in mind, something very similar to this. And so therefore it was zoned institutional a number of years ago to accommodate that type of use.
All right, any questions from commissioners before we go into the public hearing? Hearing none?
I
Oh,
have
hearing one.
I have a very, very minor question, just for curiosity. When it states that notices were sent to all property owners within 300 feet of the property, and that includes folks that are not in the city of Stoughton, right? That's
You betcha.
township folks?
Yep.
Because they're across the street. Okay.
Yeah, so just so commissioners know, that's a policy the city has. So any public hearing that we have, we send it to all property owners within 300 feet, whether they're in the city or not.
Okay.
And the reason 300 feet is kind of about a block. If you recognize the older part of the city, they're 333 feet from center block to center block. So that was one method to try to accommodate people that are close by residents.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions? Hearing none, we'll close the regular meeting, go into public hearing. Once again, nobody was signed up on this one. Anybody wish to speak to this topic? Pretty quiet out there tonight. We'll close the public hearing, reopen for our business. So we're looking for a recommendation on this one as well. And I think, as Rodney had said, that this property was purchased originally by Martin Luther for years. They rented out space at Yahara, and they're going to be transitioning to this site as the school district looks to remove Yahara from that site. So actually the timing probably works out pretty well for everyone. So hopefully it'll be seamless for them. Any questions on this? Otherwise, I'd entertain the motion.
I'll recommend to council.
There's a motion by Schumacher. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Bradford. One last opportunity for questions or comments.
I think the site will enjoy the cranes that walk back and forth next to, right by Nelson there.
It's a nice area.
Mm-hmm.
All right, hearing no questions or comments, all in favor say aye.
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 And any opposed? None opposed. That motion carries. Item number 10 is the site plan for this development, and if I remember right, site plans, we have the last say on that here at the Plan Commission, so this one here is more than a recommendation. This is an approval. Rodney, you want to cover it?
Yeah, the resolution, I'll just touch on the resolution. First of all, the two conditions really that we recommend, and there's a third we'd recommend having added to this resolution. They're pretty standard in nature, but the daycare, the council has to take action on both the CSM and the CUP. So that would be a condition of the site plan approval. And the last one we'd recommend also being added to this would be the staff review letter dated 10/27 of 2022, the one in your packet. Oftentimes we include that, and we forgot to include that in this resolution. However, this is, I think, a pretty solid site plan. They've done a fair amount of work to put together this site. There's applicants that are here and representatives from the group that can speak to it more eloquently than myself. But in essence, the site is laid out, and this, if I can zoom this in a little bit more. Sorry, I can't accomplish it very well on the screen, but nonetheless, the parking, as you can understand, is along the front side of the site. So we're on the east side of Williams Drive. The main building is situated within the center of the site, and then they have an outdoor fenced-in area on the rear of the site. You also recognize the fenced-in area separates that play area from the infiltration and the stormwater management areas. As I mentioned during the certified survey map discussion, the back part of Lot 1 is being preserved for stormwater management and works in connection with the rear part of Lot 2. In concert, the wet pond and the infiltration basins are accommodated there. I assume the commissioners have had a chance to look at the plans. It does include a gymnasium area, as well as program space within the building. We most generally look at the site plan. There's a couple of things they're still working on. And the staff review letter itemizes them. A photometric plan, a fairly minor thing, but a photometric plan is needing to be submitted, and that's contained in our staff review letter. I'm sorry, I'm trying to show you some illustrations, I think, renderings of their facility as proposed. The elevations were contained in your packet. There's some color ones as well. And certainly I encourage the applicants or designers to speak more positively about it than myself, but nonetheless, I certainly think it does a great job of trying to fit into the character, somewhat residential in nature on the opposite side of Williams Drive, but certainly an attractive facility in this location.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. My name is Mike Moss. I am an architect with ADCI based out of Lake Delton. Thank you for allowing us to present this evening and considering this project. With me tonight is Matt and Denise Krull, the owners of Gingerbread House Daycare, and also joining in virtually, Adam Ryam with Quam Engineering, our civil engineer, is on the line as well in case there's any civil-related questions. So it was mentioned, obviously, Gingerbread House Daycare is already a business in Stoughton, and this facility, as it was mentioned, would time out for them and some other entities in town as well, in the city, to be kind of a win-win for everyone. This new facility is planned to be about 16,000 square feet. Gingerbread House Daycare in its entirety has been in business for many years. I believe they have 8 or 9 existing, 8 existing facilities in 3 other municipalities? 4 other municipalities. So a long track record of successful operations for childcare. Obviously, this would be of large benefit to the city of Stoughton by allowing more families to gain the benefit of this. I guess a couple things about the facility. Obviously, you see the design there. We've worked on a couple of past projects with Matt and Denise, and as a part of this packet, while the architectural images definitely help, there's photos there of an existing facility that it's not the same facility, but it's a similar context. So I think those photos are a good representation of what the final product will be in concept. Again, it's not the same exact layout, not the same square footage, but you really can see what the building is going to look like architecturally. From a site design standpoint, we worked with everything within the ordinances, and with Michael Stacy, did a preliminary submittal and got review comments back, which we greatly appreciated. Always nice to know items that we might need to address, and we did have a few that we took care of. As was mentioned, a couple things yet are site lighting, a photometric plan, and there was a discussion or a topic yet about placement of some specific trees in relationship to the vision triangle at the driveways. I think we need to make a couple adjustments yet to some of those specific tree locations, but otherwise, per that preliminary review letter, I believe we've addressed everything. So if there's questions regarding architectural, civil, operations, we would be happy to field any questions.
All right. Are there any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Farrell?
I almost hesitate to bring it up, but the stormwater basins, everybody happy with the shape? Because one of them is close to being rectangular.
But I should highlight, there's a slight nuance to the stormwater basin areas that are non-public. These are privately held stormwater management
okay,
areas.
thank you.
The Outlot 2 and the subdivisions, that's a subdivision and plating requirement within the subdivision standards, so.
Thank you, Director Shield.
You're
For sure
welcome.
you'll landscape it beautifully.
Yes.
It's certainly much smaller in nature than what you were dealing with on the regional.
Any other questions, Commissioner Farrell?
No.
All right. Alderperson Schumacher.
About how many kids would be on this site, do they think, or?
So we're a max of 110, I
Yeah.
think, with an average of 80.
Yeah, and as I say, we're all kind of bouncing around because in licensing, there's a number it's licensed for versus a practical number.
Yeah.
So we're kind of putting that license for at about 120.
120.
Practical 90 to 100 students at one time, if that makes sense.
Got it,
So there's, you get your licensing numbers per square footage in the building.
right,
That does not mean you have a student in every 35 square feet within that building. There are spaces that aren't necessarily used, so it'd be around, we'll say around 100.
okay. And then there's requirements of green space per pupil
Yes,
also. and all
75
that.
Correct,
square foot
exactly.
Per student who's outside at the time, yeah. Correct.
I've had the joys of running through all the permitting for state-sponsored
Yes.
daycare, so.
She's really good at it.
Yep, yep.
She's really good at it.
Any other questions from commissioners? I just had one general question. I was looking at the application, and I don't know what all these acronyms mean, but I'm just wondering if the business is it an LLC, or is it a nonprofit, or how you guys structure?
So the property is owned by an LLC. It is operated by a C Corp.
Okay,
Yeah. So it's operated by what's called GBH Building Blocks.
okay,
And then the LLC is, LLC is the name of it.
okay. Well, I'm just always curious if it's a taxable property.
Yes.
It is.
Okay.
Yes,
so-
we are, I'm
Yep.
sorry, we are
Bonus
supposedly-
points.
We are supposedly for profit.
We are for profit.
I was going to let you answer
Yeah,
that.
no, we're all good, no, all good. But no, we are not a nonprofit.
Okay, all right. I was just looking for clarification on that. And then, any questions from commissioners as far as the site plan? I think that's what we're looking at here. Anybody on Zoom have anything? Haven't heard from you for a while. Hopefully you can still hear us. All right, nothing there. So we're looking for a motion on the resolution and also to include the staff letter as part of that motion.
Also move.
Okay, a motion by Bradford. Is there a second?
Go ahead, I'll second this time.
All right. And any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 And any opposed? None opposed. That motion carries. So when you hoping to have it done by?
So the hope is to break, the hope is to break ground in March of next spring, and then about Thanksgiving, we're still, obviously a few adventures in building, but we're hoping for about the Thanksgiving time, so late November, early December of 2023. And then we obviously said we're working with the school district, because they obviously have plans, so we're gonna time that out to move out of their property, get out of their way for their future projects.
Excellent. Well, good luck. We'll be seeing
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a good night. Let's see. The other thing I was going to mention, and I forgot to mention earlier, is the city council, we're going to be meeting on December 15th. Normally we meet the 2nd and 4th, or November 15th, I should say, next week. And in December, we'll meet the 2nd and 4th Tuesday. So our schedule is going to be a little bit off kilter in November. We're just going to have the one meeting tomorrow night because we had the election. We normally would have met last week. So this will be on for whatever that meeting is in December, the 2nd Tuesday. 13th?
13th.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, okay, that's what we have down to.
That's what you have? Okay, I just want to make sure I mention that before Rodney says, why didn't you mention that? All right. Next item is conditional use indoor entertainment and in-vehicle sales uses restaurants at 1424 US Highway 51, which is the former Pizza Hut site. Director Shield?
Yeah, a couple of items on your agenda tonight related to this, the first of which is the CUP, or the conditional use permit. The uses that are proposed really meet the indoor commercial entertainment for the restaurants, and the in-vehicle sales is also conditional. This facility is proposed to have a mobile pickup on the one end, as well as a drive-through order and pickup on the other end of the building. The center building center tenant is proposed to be a commercial entity, so not food related. The commissioners had discussed this in concept with the applicant prior to this. Right now it's before you for the conditional use aspect of it. There's a resolution in your packet, and as a result of some discussions today, I'm suggesting a slight change to the resolution in this situation. And the one that I want to highlight is shown on the bottom of this page in yellow. And actually, I got to delete something here quick.
Rodney,
Yes.
nothing is showing up on our screens in Zoom land.
Has that been for the entire meeting?
Yeah.
I apologize.
Thought I'd mention it.
But I do thank you for letting me know now. But just 1 second, I'll work to get that corrected. I thought it was shared.
There's
There you go.
All right. Well, you spoke eloquently to the other items that I didn't show on the screen for you.
he knows that one blindfolded.
All right. So the items that I think are appropriate to add to the resolution that is not in your packet are highlighted in yellow. We've had concerns and conversations about drive-throughs and the stacking of those into the roadways. Having a discussion with the applicant today, I think there's recognition that something needs to be at least highlighted, that no vehicles could stack into the US Highway 51-138 roadway. And if that does become an issue, it needs to be corrected. We think that there's some ways to do that, and we think even the site plan probably manages it well already, but we want to tie it to the conditional use aspect of it. And then secondly, an approved site plan by the Plan Commission. So fairly standard, I think, the first one, and we can talk through the no vehicle stacking into Highway 51 as part of the site plan as well, but we think it's appropriate to include it as part of the conditional use permit condition. So we'd request that you'd actually act on the resolution as shown on the screen as opposed to the one in your packet.
All right, any questions before we go into the public hearing? Commissioner Farrell?
Since I can't see it, because this is different than what's in our package,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's right behind you too,
I'm
if that
sorry.
helps you.
It's really just a couple of lines. I can blow it up. I'm sorry.
Okay, where we say no vehicles can stack onto 51,
So what's happening? What?
enforced.
Yeah. So this is tying it to the conditional use permit, and conversations with the applicant. It understands the importance of making sure that we have a safe site and that we don't have that happening. Again, we think that they're making provisions to prevent that already, but in the event that that happens, we're really going to have a whole discussion about the applicability of the CUP going forward for the site
Okay,
in the future, if it becomes an issue.
okay.
So, what I'm hearing, please correct me, is that the reason we're putting this in is so that it gives you leverage if that starts to happen to pull the use permit.
Yes.
Yep. And
We're not of the mind that it will,
Right,
but we're trying to make an acknowledgement of that possibility and how to deal with it.
okay.
if you might recall, the first drive-through lane, there isn't as much stack space, so they have a pre-order system that will be set up, so you literally have to have an order in. There won't be a menu board to stop at, so we think that alone will keep the traffic moving, and if somebody pulls up to the window and they have an order, they're gonna have to do something else in order to get their food.
Is that gonna be in the front? I thought that was gonna be the one in the back.
Yeah, so the applicant's here, and Jeff can come up and speak and give a summary as the applicant, but certainly the east side is the one that's the mobile pickup only.
Okay.
And as it was described to me, mobile pickup means you have to order and prepay before you even get to the window. So you're doing it by an app or online. Come on up and help enlighten the group.
Map of that one.
I will. Try
So
and
we're gonna
deal
put
with
up a map here while he's
I remember going through
trying
this.
to-
kind
Yeah,
of walking us through.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Kramer with Kramer Development. If you pull the site plan up, I can just kind of
Yeah.
talk through that for you.
Trying to jump
Can I ask
around here.
sort of a procedural question?
Sure.
First, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
We have two different items here. One is for conditional use permit, and one is
Yep.
for a site plan, so.
Yeah.
Are we
Yeah, so-
mixing here, or?
Well, the conditional use is to allow the business, and the site plan is for the building, like we just passed on
Okay.
the other one. But in this particular case, I think the conditional use is tied to the site plan because of the nature of the business.
Okay,
And what we want to do is make sure you're comfortable that they can execute this pickup lane as part of a conditional use permit.
before we move on the
Yeah.
conditional use permit. Okay,
Yep.
gotcha. Okay,
So
thank
you can walk us through and let us know
Okay.
what you've been working on.
Yeah, I can talk through the whole project and then break it down into how you guys have it set up on the agenda. So what you have in front of you is a three-tenant building. We would demolish the existing Pizza Hut, all the improvements, build back this plan. The tenant on the far right, right there, it's called tenant 3 on floor plan. That's Noodles and Company, and they have a pickup window only. So I've got them in a building in Wanakee we just opened last year, and there's no ability to order at the property. It's all done through a mobile app. And they gave me some statistics. I don't know if I shared this with you last time, but from the real estate department, their average transaction time is 52 seconds. So someone pulls in, they can't pay there, they have to pay online. They basically just grab their food from the window and go. And if they come early, they're told to, park and wait until they can come back through, or obviously they can go inside and pick up their food as well. And they have an average of 60 transactions during a weekday and 45 during a weekend. They broke down the peak hours, basically between 5 and 7 at night, and about 42% of those orders are happening at that time. So that's basically 12 orders an hour, and if each takes about a minute, you've got basically 12 minutes of an hour where you have people waiting there. So it's very different than going through McDonald's or Starbucks, that kind of thing. And their app limits the amount of orders it will take, so they only take 4 orders per 15 minutes. And the reason for that is they want to increase their efficiency in the kitchen. Everyone's working with less staff these days, so it really times things out and avoids having the big rushes. So that's what's happening on the east end of the building. We designed it to meet the ordinance, which we have the 40-foot of stack in the front of the window and 100 in the back. To get the 100 in the back, you kind of wrap around that patio. And so there was a note in the staff report that concerned me about having everything be one-way traffic. And so speaking with Rodney today, we talked through that, and based on the volume and the type of business and how they're running that pickup window, I don't think there'll be a problem. I'm in Wanakee at the property that we're doing over there quite frequently, and I've never seen more than 1 or 2 cars in the pickup window at a time. They move things through quickly. So that was the reason for the slight language tweak there with the proposal. The far left-hand side of the building, that is set up as a traditional drive-through, and we meet the ordinance requirements on that. And then we've designed this so you can have customers, employees, and/or deliveries circulate the entire property with a bypass lane on the west side of the site. I'll mention that we have, I think, 3 stormwater areas on site, so we actually have more open space than is currently there, and less impervious surface, which I think is a good thing. That's really all I have on the site, unless there's questions on that.
All right. So right now, we're talking about the conditional use permit. Does commissioners have any questions on that before we go into public hearing? All right, hearing none, close the regular meeting, reopen for public hearing. Nobody signed up for this one. Anybody out there?
Hey, Tim?
Go ahead.
Heitman.
Matt Heitman, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, he had mentioned Noodles Company on the far right side. Are there already planned tenants for the other 2, or are those just going to be marketed upon approval?
We have tenants for both those spaces as well.
All right. Anything you guys are sharing at the moment on that, or no?
I can. The center space, we're working with T-Mobile. And then the western space is Cousin Subs.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yep.
All right, anybody else for the public hearing? Hearing none, we'll close it. We'll open for our business. We're looking for a recommendation on the conditional use permit with the additional language and highlighted in yellow on the resolution. Anybody? A motion by Bradford. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Majewski. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? None opposed. That motion carries. Next item is the site plan for this property. Anything you want to highlight, Rodney?
So the common theme tonight is I've recommended some suggested changes to the resolutions. I have one for this one as well. I think it's to help articulate the change that we talked about related to the two-way traffic. It's not shown on here, but I have a recommended resolution for this one that modifies the language found in the staff review letter. So the staff review letter indicated the desire to have one-way traffic around the circulation pattern as discussed. This suggested language allows for that to be two-way traffic in the south side of the site unless vehicle stacking becomes an issue as identified by the city zoning administrator. And at that time, signage will be required to be installed by the property owner to install one-way traffic signage and do not enter signage. So consistent with what the staff message was, or recommendation was, but giving it an opportunity to work without that in place initially, which we're all optimistic it will. So we're willing to make this recommendation with that latitude.
That's consistent with what you guys talked about today?
Correct, yep.
Okay, excellent. Any questions or comments from commissioners?
Just so you know, the staff review letter itemizes a number of things that we're still tweaking, landscaping, and minor things related to that, but we feel comfortable that we can show compliance and have the documents submitted prior to construction that show compliance. Again, we're just on a couple of minor items.
Commissioner Farrell?
Yes, there's a note on here about shared parking agreement for use of 15 existing parking stalls.
I think that's on the, what is it, on the right edge of the parking lot?
Correct. It's actually not on the property, it's adjacent to it. It looks like it's the parking spaces to the, as you go into the bowling alley.
Yeah, so I don't recall when this was done, but when Pizza Hut built next door, they worked out kind of almost a swap with some parking with the bowling alley owner, because their property, I think, went further north, the Pizza Hut property did. So this property benefits from a easement for 15 parking stalls that abut the property to the east. And I believe that's owned by the bowling alley folks. So we will direct employees to park there in those 15 parking stalls to free up additional parking on site. That's the idea.
Okay, so just employees will park there.
Yeah,
How
I
many
mean, anyone
employees?
can, but
Approximately how many are we talking about?
I would guess that there'll be between 10 and 15,
Oh, okay.
depending on the time of day.
Yeah, just a little history. So at one point, with the current Pizza Hut building with the drive-through and the delivery in front of the bowling alley,
Right.
at one point, that building was owned by the same owners as the bowling center. And then they worked out some arrangement apparently over the years, and then Pizza Hut ended up purchasing that building from the bowling center at some point, and now they moved their operation in there. So there's always been some sort of a partnership between the two businesses.
Okay.
So that transferred with the sale?
Correct.
That easement
Yep.
is with the land?
Yes, that
Pizza
easement
Hut.
runs with the land on the former Pizza Hut site.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
But,
Well,
I mean, it's always,
because I park there a lot.
oh, you do? All
On
right.
the Thursday night league, and that row of parking spaces
No
Thursday
more.
night at least is filled up
Sure.
completely.
You have to get there before the employees going
Get there
forward.
before the
though.
12 employees, they'll be there already, so.
Yeah.
I'll be parking around the back probably.
Interesting.
Keep that in mind, Thursday night.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this one? All right, so I think we're looking for a motion yet, right, for the site plan? Anybody?
I'll move it with the change.
Okay, motion by Bradford, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Schumacher, and just as a reminder that we have the final say on the site plan here, so it's on us to get it right.
That was with
Yeah, with,
revised language.
with the highlighted
The
language.
language, yeah.
Yep, got it, thank you. Any discussion?
Just one question for Director Schill, I guess. From curb cut to curb cut, looking at the curb cut for the bowling alley to this new proposed, or is this existing?
That's existing.
It's existing, oh, okay, never mind then, okay.
Yep.
I didn't know if it moved, okay.
And when are you looking at starting and completing? Do you have a timeline?
I'd like to start early spring and then deliver space to tenants probably late next fall, and then see them open, late 2023 to early 2024. Like it's mentioned earlier, construction's a bit wacky right now, so yeah, some things line up for us.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate having you, bring a new facility and some new businesses to Stoughton, so.
Thank you.
I think people will be excited about that. Looks like it's gonna be a busy summer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Glad you went through with the deal.
Yeah,
I
thank
know
you. Appreciate
when we
it.
spoke last time, it was
Yeah.
like you weren't sure. It was
Right.
all dependent, so glad you went through with it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. All in favor of the site plan, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? None opposed, that carries. Thank you.
Thanks again.
Have a good night. Item 13 is facade and sign improvements at 176 East Main Street. What do we have for this one?
So,
It's the former Big Sky.
yeah, so this one's somewhat similar to the sign discussion you're having up the street. As we mentioned, there was other projects that we've highlighted to the Landmarks Commission that they may in the future have authority over. This would be one of the other ones. We didn't get any feedback from them on this one, but the request is for the renovations kind of as graphically shown on this illustration at this site. There's a resolution in your packet, and we're not proposing any amendments to this resolution. So for what it's worth, that's what we've provided at this point. Certainly, if you've got questions on it, happy to try to answer them for you. The applicants are available too.
Yeah, no public hearing on this one either.
Correct.
I just want to say I'm here.
Oh, okay. Thanks for being here.
Nice
Does
job.
the commissioners have any initial questions or comments on this one?
Nope.
All right.
I just want to say that I think the design and the look of this is, the aesthetic of this is much more in keeping with
Yes.
the rest of downtown. This looks like it belongs there.
It looks modern and
Right.
I want to walk in there.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
Yeah. You'll have to wait until spring, I'm afraid. Unless you want to go help construct.
Well, I do that once in a while.
I know, I've heard. So there is a resolution. I'd entertain the motion for the resolution.
I'll make that motion.
All right, Robinson, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Carabello. Any discussion?
The only thing I wish, and it's only just a wish, that's all I'm throwing it out there, would be, there's one way you could just put a pop of red in there,
Oh,
and that
something
would
to
pull
make it-
some of the lentils down from the top of the building. I'm not saying that you must, I'm just saying it would be really cool and it would tie the whole building together. That's it.
I didn't know you were so
Door
artistic.
The door trim can be
I
red.
have to live with
and lots
one.
of red
Well,
letters.
Whatever art's
Or
color.
maybe just dessert cafe.
Okay,
Oh, that's true, maybe the lettering, I don't know,
okay.
anything. But again, not a
They
condition.
They stand out in the winter with the red.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 And any opposed? None opposed, that's approved. We have
We're all designers.
an SIP for Lot 6 in the Highway 51 West Development. We have somebody here that's been waiting patiently. We're busy, aren't we?
Well, that's what it's supposed to be, right?
Yeah, Mr. Elliott is here again. You've probably seen him before.
So, I've been there before, so thanks. We did get a letter back, and I have got Ron Kloss from D'Onofrio Kotke here too, that does the engineering and the site plans and the landscape and the plannings and stuff, so we're here to answer any questions that we can for you to make sure this thing goes smooth and we can get it done easy, quickly.
We appreciate that. You want to kind of run us through the SIP quickly, Rodney?
Yeah, so it's not much different than what you saw as part of the general development plan. You might remember they had moved quite far into the design already, so I'm trying to just get to Lot 6 is located in this area of the site. Their site plan, I'm sorry. The building plans, a number of duplexes on the site, and let's see if I can get to the actual site plan. Sorry, I think I already went by it. Here we go. Here's the site plan. You might also recall that they heard what the access suggestions were from the emergency response. The fire department was interested in having a secondary response access off of Oak Opening Drive. That's been provided. The facility is not different in essence from what your general development plan was submitted based on, and therefore it's recommended for approval from the staff. We would recommend that you include our staff review letter as part of one of the conditions. Again, that particular sentence wasn't added to the last part of this one.
But Rodney, what actually did change from the last time that we looked at it?
Maybe a few trees. I think it was primarily landscaping. I don't think it had the landscaping plan articulated completely for the GDP, but in
Well,
essence.
there was a question on the vision on the entryways,
Right.
and we've already got a new plan, and we've got that in. You haven't seen that yet, but we did bring copies with us tonight if you want. One of the other questions they hit, well, the maple trees, I guess, we don't get any credit for.
Right.
So we may go with northern red oak on there to help cover it. And we did move a couple of them trees at the entrances back just a little bit so we have the vision.
So that's why we recommend including the staff review letter, because that articulates those things that they're working through, refining those small items, yeah.
And the other thing was the trash. We have containers in the garage for recycling and for trash. And we will, through the condo docs, that'll be part of the condo dues, we will have a private carrier that will pick up the trash every week on a allocated day, and every other week on the recyclables, and then we'll bring it to the end of the driveway. When the street's set up like that, we can go right through the subdivision and dump them in and go right out the other way, so there shouldn't be any problem with that.
I just had a kind of quick thing come to mind. As far as mailboxes in this area, Rodney,
So I think there's actually a mailbox cluster as
There's
part
a
of the
cluster
development.
mailbox, yes, and it comes off of the south entrance.
okay.
And it's located on the right-hand side, and we'll check and make sure that whatever the postal company wants us to use, but we have 2 or 3 different vendors we can get them from, so.
Seems like that's becoming more common. Is that what you're seeing out there?
Pardon me?
You're seeing more of that out there from the...
Starting to.
Yeah.
We're starting to. On the bigger developments, they're even going to giant clusters, so everybody goes and picks up their mail, so. I think it's a way to try to save our mail system, you know, and they make one stop and stuff them all in instead of drive around to everybody's individual home, so.
Okay. All right. Any questions from any of the commissioners? So I would entertain a motion for the SIP to include the staff review letter.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Schumacher, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Bradford. All right, one more time for questions or comments on this one. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? None opposed, that motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you for your
Yes.
time.
All right. Next item is, number 15 is public sidewalk and driveway location at 1000 Riverview Drive. And as I recall, this one here, we recently approved a CSM to split this lot. Does that sound right?
Yeah, we approved a CSM previously, and at the time, the applicant said that the driveway was going to come off of Riverview. We've had an inquiry about trying to have the driveway come off of Roby Road, and if you'd like to hear the rationale for that, I think that's appropriate.
Sure. You can come on up to the podium. Sorry you had to wait so long.
Me too.
Hopefully you found some of it interesting.
Yes.
All right.
So I had started out talking to Mike Stacy and just asking him some questions about the lot because I was interested in buying a lot to build a house for my daughter. And from Mike's replies, I sort of decided it wasn't going to work for me, because I thought the perfect layout is more or less what I've shown there, where, because it slopes towards the east, you would have a one-story with an partially exposed basement towards the east, and then a breezeway and a garage. If you were to have the driveway off of Riverview, then you pretty much have to have a two-story building, and it just wasn't what I wanted. So I was just curious about what the guidelines were. And then Mike said that he got back to me and said Rodney was coming to the Plan Commission to discuss the sidewalk, public sidewalk along Roby Road, and he suggested that I put something together and find out what the feelings were about having a driveway come off Roby Road. So this is not as far as advanced as any of the projects we've been talking about, but it is just to figure out where you're at in terms of guidelines of developing that lot.
If you wouldn't mind, I think I can explain, certainly the discussion about the driveway prompted the discussion about how to deal with sidewalks at the same time. So I do have concerns about a driveway being positioned off of either Lincoln or Roby. You recognize there's 3 frontages to this particular property, shown as 1,000 on the screen here. And as you also know, this is a very steep grade right here. Stop and go traffic at Lincoln and Roby, oftentimes during snow events, there's a fair challenge with people even getting up the hill at that point. So I think there's some safety concerns about having a driveway that would come off of this one deep lot frontage this lot that has 3 frontages. I think the most safe location for a driveway is actually off of Riverview. Due to the proximity, the collector volume of traffic on Roby and Lincoln and that intersection, I really think that it's appropriate for the driveway to be positioned off of Riverview. You might recall that when the CSM, yes, it wasn't articulated as a condition, but the applicant said they were going to do that, have the driveway off of Riverview, so we just kind of left it as such, and she was able to suggest an alternative, but I think we should really reinforce our position on whether we would allow it off of Roby or not. And as a staff person, I'm opposed to that. But in addition, I think it's an appropriate time to really look and have a discussion with the commission about delaying sidewalks here when this site develops. You will know that we installed sidewalks on the south side of Roby, and that is a very difficult grade section to deal with, and to accomplish it on the north side of Roby in this area, you really don't have any connectivity. And when you're really talking about creating accessible routes, you'd have to put in additional accessible ramps in very challenged situations across Roby Road, across Riverview where there is no connection to the south, and likewise trying to cross Lincoln. So not unlike previous actions, I've prepared a modified resolution for your consideration, and it really reinforces my belief that we shouldn't allow a driveway off of Lincoln or Roby and require it to be off of Riverview. And likewise, I'm recommending that we delay all sidewalk installation on all 3 sides of this property until the city takes on a larger project in that area, which there isn't one planned. And you can see the connectivity issues in the overview map that I shared previously. So the modified resolution here reaffirms my recommendations to that effect.
So, commissioners, you may or may not know that typically when somebody builds a house, At that point, they're required to put in the sidewalk, so that's why, at this point, based on what Rodney sees here, he's recommending we delay that because it really doesn't make sense. It'd be a sidewalk to nowhere, plus it would be challenging to really even have something in there that would even be practical in the long run. So usually, the other point we would do a sidewalk is if we did a road reconstruction, I mean like a total reconstruct, and that is typically the other time where we would make a decision to install the sidewalks. And I think what he's suggesting is we would assess the whole, basically that whole section of road at that point, and make a decision then. And if we were to put in a sidewalk now, it could sit that way. I don't even know when that road is slated for reconstruction off the top of my head.
There isn't a timeline for it being scheduled for reconstruction,
So-
but if we individually put sidewalks on this parcel on any side, creating the accessible ramps properly designed to meet guidelines for grade and contours would be very challenging. It would take a fair amount of engineering and actually reconstruction of big corners to even make it possible. So therefore, I don't think it makes sense to do that at this point. So that's the reason for the recommendation.
So I guess on the resolution here, we can break it down. I guess the first question for the commissioners is, how do you feel about the access points? I think you heard, and I tend to agree with Rodney because I know how that the intersections on Roby and Lincoln and Riverview can be. I had one car that I used to own that the transmission could not handle going up that hill. It was the weirdest thing. There was two spots. One was going up Roby, and the other one was going off the ramp over by East Town, where that tranny just couldn't deal with it for whatever reason. But in the wintertime, we get some calls there quite often about coming in and paying extra attention to that intersection, for salting and plowing. So that is a slippery. Plus, you have traffic to and from the two schools going by there. I know we've had conversations about, bike lanes and things like that as well. So I tend to agree with Rodney's, recommendation to try to keep it on Riverview. I think it's consistent with what we try to do on all of our busy roads, not just this one. And the DOT is the same way, especially on the highways. They do not encourage access on busy highways. They try to do it on the side streets. Similar to what we did in 314 Main Street, we actually, where the two apartments are going up, we were able to get rid of one access point and then access it from Prairie, which we think is a much better situation, and so did the neighbors. So they work with us to change that easement. So I agree with that, and I guess I'd like to hear from the commissioners to see if you have any thoughts on that one, and then we'll talk about the sidewalks after that, I guess.
Was your goal to get a ranch?
Pardon me?
Was your goal to get a ranch floor plan rather than a two-story? Was that the reason?
Yeah, ranch and then lower level incorporated into the plan. So, yeah.
You could still accomplish that with an basement level parking off of Riverview, for example. You'd have steps in either situation, right? Your ranch plan would.
Oh,
still
no, I understand, but, yeah. No, that's okay. I have not put an offer in on the property, so I'm not losing anything.
Okay.
And, what I was proposing was what I preferred. And so,
Well, you don't ask, you don't get, right?
yeah, right,
So it doesn't hurt to ask.
yeah.
Commissioner Farrell?
Yeah, I certainly understand the desire not to have the driveways there, but if I'm looking at Google Maps, there's already driveways off of Roby Road, both east and west, it looks like, of this property. Multiple, like several, are there not?
Yeah.
Am I looking at the right spot?
Yeah,
Is
you're
it
certainly
Roby
looking
Road
at,
and Riverview Drive?
yeah, but the difference is the proximity to
Yeah,
the
okay, you got
intersection.
there too.
So there's this street and this street, there's no driveways on the south side between there. This is the steepest stretch of Roby before you get to Lincoln. And there's no downhill, there's no stop sign at Riverview. so there's not a stopping maneuver here. There's stop signs actually at Roby and Lincoln. So you have queuing traffic oftentimes because of the stop condition
Okay.
going up the hill at Roby. So in my opinion, I think that creates a situation that we should avoid if possible.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, having
Go ahead.
navigated through that, dropping a high schooler off, it's a terrible intersection. Granted, it's only at certain times of the day, a couple times during the day. Well, not really. I mean, in the evening, that gets to be kind of a rough intersection as well. I just think it would be a challenge if you were going to build it for your daughter. It would just be a challenge for her to even get out of that driveway on occasion. I just think it would be a headache for that. So I think off of Riverside, I mean, I would never have voted even for the CSM if there was a possibility to go off of Roby. I wouldn't have even voted for that.
All right. Anybody out on Zoom land had any thoughts about this one? All right. Go ahead.
I would say that I'm a proponent of common sense, and coming out onto Roby Road is just a bad idea. Too much traffic, too busy, too steep. Lincoln isn't an option, so it has to be Riverview.
Okay. Well, sounds like we have a consensus on that one. Anybody have any thoughts about the sidewalk? Are you guys okay with delaying?
Delaying is fine.
Yeah. Anybody strongly disagree with that assessment? All right, so I think we have a consensus on both. There's a resolution in here. Do you want us to take action on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
So we're,
The one that I have on the screen would be
Okay.
preferred.
so there's a motion on the screen. There's some items highlighted in yellow. Is somebody willing to make it?
I'll make the motion that Rodney's presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
And any discussion? Hear none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? None opposed, that carries. At least you know where we stand.
That's what I wanted to know.
All right, thanks for coming in.
Yes, thank you.
Good to see you.
For waiting so long.
That too. Okay, future agenda items, is there anything that you have, Rodney?
Yes, so we will we'll certainly have plat information related to Magnolia Springs, and they may bring back a conceptual Outlot 2 layout for us to consider. I don't know exactly how they'll approach that concern that's been raised and articulated. The other item that we'll likely have is an urban service area amendment request for the east side on the Stonecrest area, so that's east of Racetrack Road. The preliminary application materials have been submitted. We're doing a staff review of some of that and providing comments back to the applicant at this point. So that will be coming forward at some point as well.
Rodney, that's the smaller one. That's about 6 or 8 lots. Is that correct?
I wish it was smaller. No, it's actually quite a bit larger.
The larger
So
one of them?
so the east side one is Matson Airport, essentially all the way from A to 51. But they essentially have probably a 20-plus year planning horizon for construction.
Okay.
So they're proposing to bring in the USA for the entire segment of land.
Okay.
But the initial construction is.
that tiny little triangle at
Yeah.
curve there.
That'd be part of their phase one
Phase one,
after
okay.
the USA was amended.
Got
We
it.
encourage them to do, well, not only us, but CARPC encourages them to do an urban service area amendment on the whole thing.
Okay.
That way we can make sure it's all compatible, you know, when it's all said and done with, when it's phased in.
Sure.
So I think that's kind of the conversations we've been having with them, and they've agreed on that. But yeah, I think it will be, I think that was that little triangle piece, I think is where they want to start. You might have seen that on a map. So yeah, obviously it's busy. We appreciate you guys. It's one of the longer meetings we've had for a while, but there's a lot of business on there, so thanks for being here tonight. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Lasky and Bradford. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? None opposed. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.